Hi, this is the Business Guy with Lawyers Limited, and I'm very proud and excited to introduce to you Mr. Paul Hess. Paul and I have been working together for about 17 years, and he is the top asset protection consultant with the company. How you doing, Paul?
I'm good, Business Guy. How are you today?
Oh, doing great. So tell us about our history together.
Well, I started with the company about 17 years ago, but prior to that, I was one of the largest clients you had in your company.
That is true. In fact, I just liked him so much that I was just really trying to recruit. I really want him to be part of our organization. So I just really was excited when he said yes and decided to join us well over a decade and a half ago.
You know, it was one of the best decisions I made. You know, working with your company for those 3 or 4 years prior to and meeting all my clients' needs, I knew this was an organization I wanted to be a part of. Seeing how the organization was run, how it took care of people, the customer service, and everything the company did, it was just an easy transition for me.
And tell us about your background, like where you grew up and your history.
Well, I grew up in Southern California, went to college in Southern California. I'm now in Washington State. Before I got into asset protection, I was actually working with dentists on new composite technologies. So that was really exciting because I'm a technical kind of guy and I like to make sure that point A does go to point B. So that was a really challenging and rewarding career for me.
Okay, and what does Paul like to do in his personal time when you're not working at Lawyers Limited?
Well, you know, I live up here in Washington State, beautiful green, lots of lakes, rivers. I fish, I kayak a lot. In fact, I was just out last night doing some kayaking, and I play a lot of golf and hang out with my family. I mean, that's the best things I like to do, is some mountain biking as well.
And I might add that even though Paul lives on Pacific time, he works East Coast hours, so he's an early riser.
Yes, I always have been an early riser. It's a curse I have. I'm up before my alarm ever goes off. So I work Eastern hours, but I'm also available in the afternoons for my West Coast clients as well. Up here in Oregon and Washington, I get a lot of people in the area that know who I am and come to me for assistance. So I always try to make myself available as well.
Yes, and then when you hired a company years ago, tell us about that.
Well, yes. So I was working in the financial industry. I used to have to go over to like Germany and London and deal with different banking there. The clients that I had at the time needed to have an offshore company. And I trudged around to a few different companies. They couldn't get it done, or it took weeks and weeks and weeks. And I ran across the company here and they were getting my companies back to me in 5 to 7 days. Everything I needed taken care of. Clients were exceedingly happy, and it just made a smoother transition and a much happier client base for myself.
Good. To tell the audience, like, who our typical client would be.
You know, every day we get clients that, you know, maybe their child was driving a car, they were driving a car, got into an accident, the business partnership split up, and they got to protect what they have. You know, with our real estate investors, slip and falls. So those are the clients that typically call us. In fact, about 86% of the clients that call us are already facing some type of action. And that's where we have to step in quickly and swiftly and make sure we ascertain what their assets are, the best strategy to protect their assets.
Now, when we get calls from clients like that, tell me how that affects them emotionally. What kind of traits do you notice with these people on their stress level and so on?
Well, obviously the stress level is through the roof, and it's a sad thing, and it's a hard call because they're very emotionally drained or excited. And so we have to lead them by the hand, explain the process step by step, make sure they understand what legal tools are available to them to protect them. Then our customer service team takes over and really leads them along the way, helps them with the applications, helps them with the whole process. So it's not just set up a plan, but we work it all the way through to the end. And of course, I have clients from the first week I started here 17 years ago that still call me, still need to add things. Real estate investors are always growing.
Yeah, and where we set up international trusts for asset protection from lawsuits, domestic trust, LLCs, both internationally and in the U.S. What I tell people, and you could probably attest to that, we're not just establishing legal structures, we're really offering peace of mind.
Oh, that's true. I can't tell you how many clients, you know, after the fact have called me up, tears in their eyes saying, I'm so glad I did this. This is the best decision I ever made. And, you know, I've had clients that have called me up and said, you know, I don't think this is going to amount to much. I think everything's fine, but tell me about what you can do for me. And we go through the process, and then they'll call back 6 months, 2 years later, whenever the whole trial or whatever they're facing is over, and say, I lost. And I'm so glad I put these strategies in place because I didn't lose a dime.
Okay, let me lay out a little scenario. Joe is a 62-year-old contractor, very well off, $5.6 million in a stock market portfolio, a bunch of cash, a bunch of construction trucks, a home with a lot of equity in the state that doesn't protect much of it. And he had somebody who actually slammed on the brakes in front of one of his trucks on purpose for the intention of initiating a lawsuit against his company and or him personally. What would you do with a client with that asset base and that type of problem problem where he's getting sued for way more than his insurance coverage.
So, we ascertain all his assets. Does he have a home? Does he have a vacation home? Does he have rental properties? What's in the business? How many trucks does he have? You have to really dig and make sure you have everything you know about the client's assets so we don't leave anything out exposed or a crack in the armor. The typical thing in this particular case is we had set up a Cook Islands trust. We've been doing those for over 30 years. They've been 100% effective in protecting our clients' assets. And then we couple that with an offshore company, and the best region for that is the Caribbean island of Nevis because they don't recognize foreign judgments. And then for the business, we do different types of lien drafting for personal assets. So we draft liens that they're not taking any money out of the property, but what they're doing is they're going to take away the threat of the lawsuit. Because when someone sues you, there's two things they really want: liquid cash or something they can easily convert to cash.
Yeah, because with significant equity in real estate, a pack of hyenas come around and they see a healthy specimen, they're going to devour that deer or whatever it is. If they just see a dry bones carcass out in the desert, they don't get too excited. And that's what we do when we do equity stripping, right? We just strip out the equity of the property to make it less exciting to the attorney hyenas out there who might want to go for a big kill.
That's correct. And it's the easiest strategy to do. It's one of the best defensive measures you can do. And this is what we recommend anybody in business, whether you're in real estate, trucking, we can protect it.
Okay, for the stock market portfolio, the liquid assets, we do a Cook Islands trust, set up some land trusts for the real estate, maybe some LLCs if it's rental property and not their personal residence. Do some equity stripping, strip out the equity. What else would we do for that person?
Well, we'd set up an offshore brokerage account because if they do have a stock account, they don't want to sell off, have to pay the tax, and then rebuy it at a higher rate. So what we do is we set up a brokerage account offshore, held by their offshore company, and they can transfer their stocks in kind, much like if it was at JP Morgan, they want to send it to Fidelity. Any liquid cash, depending what their goals are. If it's long-term investment cash that they want to park somewhere and earn a rate of return, we have several banking options that will meet those needs as well. And then for your business account, we would set up another account to handle your business assets.
And how effective have you seen the offshore strategy for clients?
Well, for all the years that I've been here and before, I've seen it work 100% of the time. People think they can hide assets. Hiding never works. You got to use the legal tools necessary to protect your assets. And that's a Cook Islands trust coupled with a Nevis LLC and then the other steps we talked about. So it has been 100% effective.
Yeah, and we do set up domestic structures as well, like domestic asset protection trusts. But what we found is results-oriented judges will go down some legal theory of liability rabbit hole, like we've talked about before on this channel, and find a way to get those assets and transfer them to the plaintiff or judgment creditor after they win the lawsuit. In actual tests in the courtroom, we had not seen the domestic trust be effective, whereas we have seen the offshore trust protect the assets 100% of the time.
Well, a lot of people talk about Nevada Trust, and Alaskan Trust, South Dakota Trust, etc. I've seen time and time again, if you're not in that state with the assets in that state, they seldom ever work.
Now, what about that client who says, well, in the U.S. it's safe and it's familiar, and off there it's scary and feels dangerous to me and risky, and red flags might go off and horns might play? Or what do you tell that person who has the foreign fear?
The thing is, if you were to Google the top 50 safest banks in the world, 3 U.S. banks show up on it. 2 of which you probably never heard of, which are 2 farming banks in the Midwest. And the third one you probably have heard of, it's a national bank. The other thing you have to understand is that most of these jurisdictions we use, they don't have fractional reserve lending. In other words, if a bank's worth $1 million, they can loan up 20 times that. Offshore isn't that way. They're regulated heavier. They require much more information to open up a bank account. They're more government watched. They're safer than the banks down the street.
Yeah, in fact, when people really look online and research the world's safest banks, we'll see that the vast majority of the safest banks in the world are outside the U.S. A lot of U.S. people don't realize that.
No, that's true. Offshore banks are absolutely stronger by far and large than U.S. banks.
Maybe you can talk about a type of tool where somebody can be domestic before the problem strikes that automatically triggers to offshore when the problem comes and they really need the strong protection.
Well, that's a great question. And the tool for that is a trigger trust. So this is where we set up a trust that the person will be the trustee of. It basically is a domestic trust. We set up all the other components. Now, keep in mind, the date of the trust is what is important. Hypothetically, let's say it had today's date on it, and you set up a trigger trust. 6 months from now, 6 years from now, you find yourself in litigation or under the threat of a lawsuit. You call us up, we pull the trigger on that trust, we remove U.S. trustee, we put in the foreign trustee, and now you're protected. And why you're protected is if you get ordered to pay a judgment, you correspond to the trustee. I've been ordered by this judge of this court court for a judgment against me in this amount. And the trustee, which is our law firm, offshore, and duty bound to protect you, will correspond back. They're not going to comply with this order.
Now, I have a question for you, Paul. Why should people trust Paul Hess as a human being? Why should people trust you personally?
Well, I mean, the years of experience that I have in this field, I'm a family man. I have no desire to be anywhere else but at work, and I'm only going to take care of my clients. And that's what I've done my whole adult career. It's just who I am, and that's how I do things. I don't hem and haw. It's the sad day I get is when someone calls up and says, "Hi, I was wondering, can I do this?" And they might have a lis pendens on their property or a judgment already in place. And it's a sad day when I tell them, no, it's actually too late. That actually bothers me. It hurts me. I'd rather have them call me up prior to that, get everything taken care of, get them protected, and have them call me later on saying, thanks, I was protected.
And what do you say to those people who say, well, what if the trustee runs off with my money? What do you say to them?
So first of all, you're the signatory on all your accounts until maybe you have to change yourself from signatory to the trustee. Also, they have triple redundancy, meaning that not one trustee could sign on your bank accounts. It takes three. The other thing is they're licensed, which means they have extensive background checks, and they're bonded, which means they're insured. And in all the years we've been doing this, in the 30 years that I know the company's been doing it, there has been one case where a trustee ever did anything wrong.
Yeah, and it's not just one guy sitting in the garage. It's a law firm, and several attorneys must sign before any action is taken during the period of time when the trustee steps in to protect our client's assets. Now, Paul, what about trusting our company? Why should people trust Lawyers Limited as a company?
Well, I think if you talk to our staff, you're going to find that we're a great group of people. I really love working with the people I work with, knowing what their fabric is, what their cloth is made of. The other thing is you got to look at our track record. Formed in 1906, 116 years old. We're the largest asset protection firm in the nation. We do more trust than anybody else on the planet. So if you really want the best asset protection, our company's the one to do it with.
Now let's talk downsides. What's the worst thing that could happen to a client if they do this? If they go ahead and set up this asset protection structure, what's the worst thing?
Well, I mean, the worst thing that is they have to learn how to live an asset protection lifestyle, meaning that it's not like a bank account here where you have bill pay and all those fundamentals. You have to learn to live the asset protection lifestyle. But the clients that do and know they're protected, it's not troublesome at all. In fact, they rather enjoy it. They know that they're protected. As far as downside with the banking, the banks are strong, safe banks. The trustee is held up for 30 years. There's really no downside other than the fact you have to learn how to live just a little bit differently than you normally have.
Yeah, people have access with debit cards. They can wire transfer funds from their international accounts, so they have access just like if it was the bank down the street, all the online access and so on. I have another question. What about the person who says, well, I'm not that much at risk. You know, I'm sued, but I'm pretty sure I'll win. What do you tell that person?
The problem is, why take the chance? I've had many clients that decided not to go forward, only to call me 6 months, a year and a half later, wishing they had done it, telling me I lost. I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. You have to understand something. Judges nowadays will say, if neither side's happy, I've done my job. Meaning that you could be totally right, but you're going to feel the sting. The judge is going to make sure neither side's happy. It's just why leave it to chance.
Yeah, in fact, how many 4 to 5 decisions have we seen on the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, supposed to be the best judges in the world? In many cases, it just depends on what person is sitting on the bench on that day will determine how your case goes.
Yes, and I tell clients, you know, why flip a coin over your assets? Because that's basically what you're doing if you're not protected. It's a coin flip.
And what do you say to that person who's indecisive? They want to think about it. They want to do research. They want to talk to their mama, and they want to talk to their cousin Bobo, and they want to talk to their attorney and their accountant and everybody else before they make a decision. They're just indecisive. What do you tell that person?
Well, you know, I usually lead into a story about this young lady that had called me, and she had quite a few properties, lawsuit brewing. For a few weeks, she kept saying, I want to think about it. And I would call back and say, what questions haven't I answered? What have I missed? I explained to her with her property, they could do what's called a lis pendens, or pending lien, which means the creditor can place a pending lien to protect that equity in the property in case there is a judgment. She can't sell it. She can't get paid on it. You know, after a few weeks of this, she called me up and she goes, Paul, I got to ask you a question. I have these liens on my properties, these pending liens. What does that mean? I told her, it means it's over.
She head scratched herself into oblivion, and it was too late. We couldn't do anything at that point. So that small window of opportunity that people have to protect themselves, it's time to jump through when the threat arises. Yes?
That's true. They got to move swiftly. There is a small window of opportunity.
Paul, I really enjoy our time together. Of course, we have time together every weekday because we've been working together for the past 17 years plus. So what's your parting shot?
Don't let somebody else decide what's going to happen with your assets. And I do appreciate working with the business guy for over 17 years. The wealth of knowledge that he's instilled upon me is just really makes my job wonderful. I love helping people, and it's a great company to work for from top to bottom.
We're talking today with Paul Hess. If you'd like to to set up an asset protection structure, you can call and talk to Paul at 954-400-1050 or visit assetprotectionplanners.com or lawyerslimited.com, and you can go ahead and ask for Paul when you call. Paul, I appreciate you joining me on video today.
Thank you, business guy. It was a pleasure. Always is. Have a great day.
Okay, talk again soon.